Welcome to the deep dive. COP28 really laid it bare. We're just not moving fast enough on climate goals. Mitigation needs to be urgent, undeniable.
This is a stark picture, all right.
So today, we're cutting through that noise. We're diving into some critical insights from a really important study. It's called Comprehensive Prospective Environmental Assessment of Innovative Photovoltaic Technologies, Integration into Electricity Grids in Finland, Germany, and Spain. Quite a mouthful, but important.
Absolutely, it gets specific.
And this isn't just, another look at solar panels. It's more about the blueprint, the evolving plan for a sustainable energy future. Our mission here is to unpack where the environmental impacts really are, how climate changes the game for efficiency, and the surprising role these technologies might play in totally transforming national power grids by 2050.
It's a crucial piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, get ready, because we're going to explore some cool stuff, floating solar, these bifacial panels catching light from both sides, and even building integrated photovoltaics, or BIPV. Let's dive in.
Great. And you're right, the need for solar PV innovation, it's never been stronger. Like you said, the climate targets just underscore how far we really have to go.
That's right.
And shifting to renewables, it's not just about emissions, is it? It's fundamental for energy security, cutting costs, getting away from those volatile fossil fuels.
Absolutely. And solar PV is just such a key player in that renewable space. I mean, it's abundant, it's scalable.
And the costs keep coming down.
Exactly. Plus, it's so flexible. From tiny home systems right up to massive power plants, its modular nature is a huge plus.
That versatility is definitely key. And that brings us right to these advanced technologies that this study really zeroes in on.
Okay.
Things like floating panels, installed on water.
Right, seen pictures of those?
Bifacial modules designed to grab sunlight from the front and the back.
More efficient, presumably.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
And then building integrated photovoltaics, BIPV, where the panels actually become part of the building structure itself.
Like roof tiles or facades.
Exactly. So these innovations, they really broaden where and how we can use solar. It's about boosting efficiency and sustainability.
Okay, so to really get a handle on the environmental side of all this innovation, you need the right tools, right?
Yeah.
This is where life cycle assessment, LCA, comes in. We've mentioned it before, but maybe a quick refresher. And what was different about this study's approach?
Sure. So LCA, it's basically the standard framework for looking at a product's environmental impact across its whole life, from pulling raw materials out of the ground.
All the way to disposal, cradle to grave.
Exactly. But what's really novel here is the use of Prospective LCA, or PLCA.
Perspective, so looking forward.
Precisely. It weaves in these scenario-based projections. It tries to figure out future impacts, considering how energy mixes will change, how climate might shift.
Okay.
It lets us anticipate how these technologies might perform environmentally down the road, maybe in 2030 or even 2050, and build that foresight right into the analysis.
So it's like getting a sneak peek, a sort of forward-looking movie of solar's environmental journey. That sounds powerful.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
So what was the main driving question for this cinematic view?
Well, the main goal was to really comprehensively evaluate the environmental performance, the sustainability of all these different PV systems, especially the new ones, as they get integrated into power grids in different places.
And what makes this study stand out? It sounds like it covered a huge amount.
It really did. I think what makes it unique is how holistic it is. First, the range of technologies, not just the flashy new ones like floating and bifacial and BIPV, but also standard monofacial panels and building attached PV, BAPV, your typical rooftop setup.
Okay, so a broad comparison.
Right. Second, the time horizons.
Yeah?
They looked at 2022 for established tech, then 2030 for the cutting-edge stuff, and projected out to 2050 for what we anticipate being adopted then.
Wow. 3 distinct points in time. And you mentioned different places, too, climates.
Exactly. That's the third big thing. Diverse climatic zones. They looked at subarctic conditions in Lappeenranta, Finland.
Okay, cold and less sun.
Continental climate in Munich, Germany.
More moderate, maybe?
And then Mediterranean in Murcia, Spain.
Well, that's sun there.
Right. So you get this deep understanding of how regional conditions, especially sunlight, affect performance and the environmental footprint.
That makes sense. And did they model how the tech itself evolves over those timeframes?
Yes, absolutely. For 2022, they based it on multi-crystalline silicon PERC tech that was pretty standard then.
Okay.
For 2030, they shifted to silicon heterojunction technology known for better efficiency. And then looking out to 2050, they anticipated perovskite crystalline silicon tandem cells.
Perovskites, that's the really cutting edge stuff, isn't it? High potential.
Huge potential for efficiency, yes. But the research is careful to note there are still challenges, things like manufacturing scale-up, long-term stability, how they behave if damaged. It's still an evolving area.
Good to keep that context. So how did they measure all this? What was the common yardstick for comparing, say, a floating panel in Spain to BIPV in Finland?
The functional unit, the basis for comparison, was 1 kilowatt hour of electricity generated.
It's simple enough.
And the analysis was cradle to grave, covering everything from getting the materials to tossing the panel at the end of its life.
Got it. And those climate zones you mentioned, the sun differences, can you elaborate a bit? How big a difference are we talking?
Oh, quite significant. Murcia in Spain, it gets a lot of direct sunlight, high solar radiation because it's further south.
Right.
Munich gets decent sun, but less than Murcia, more cloud cover, typically.
Okay.
And Lappeenranta in Finland, being so far north, gets the least amount of annual solar radiation. The sun's angle is lower, more atmospheric interference, snow, clouds. That drastically cuts how much energy a panel can produce over a year.
That's going to be crucial later, I bet. Now, transparency is key. Were there any major assumptions or simplifications made, things listeners should know?
Yeah, there always are in studies this big. For example, they assumed a standard transport distance of 500 kilometers for components and waste.
Okay. A necessary simplification.
And for BIPV, they didn't count the potential environmental benefit of it replacing traditional building materials like tiles or cladding.
Ah, interesting. So the BIPV impacts might even be a bit lower in reality if you factored that in.
Potentially, yes. They were open about these limitations, which is good practice.
Okay, so armed with this forward-looking PLCA method, the researchers went hunting for the environmental hotspots. Where do the biggest impact actually hide in these advanced PV systems? What did they find?
The overwhelming finding, really consistently across the board for floating, bifacial, and BIPV, was that the manufacturing stage is the big one.
Manufacturing?
Yeah, often responsible for more than 90% of the total environmental impact.
Wow, over 90%. That is
Yeah.
huge. It feels a bit ironic, doesn't it? Building the green future still involves this intensive manufacturing phase.
It does. It really highlights where we need to focus innovation. Absolutely.
Can we break that down a bit? Within manufacturing, what specific parts or processes are the main culprits? Maybe using that Murcia 2022 example you mentioned.
Sure. So looking at Murcia in 2022, the PV cells themselves, the core silicon part, they were the single biggest contributor, often over 48% of the impact across all the systems.
Just the cells. Why so high?
It comes down to, well, huge energy consumption during manufacturing, obviously, plus the extensive use of silicon itself and significant water needs. And this hits several impact categories. Climate change, obviously, but also things like eutrophication, which is nutrient pollution in water.
Right. MEP, FDP, TEPP in the study.
Exactly. And ionizing radiation risks, fossil resource use, water use. It's broad.
So the heart of the panel is where a lot of the impact lies. What about the other bits for these advanced systems? Floating PV, for example.
For floating PV, the modules, the whole assembled panel unit, were the second biggest hit, around 18% on average. That was linked mostly to the electricity used in making them and producing the flat glass. It impacts things like particulate matter, air quality, and ozone depletion.
And for bifacial, the ones catching light from both sides.
For those, the mounting system was the second highest impact, almost 20%.
The frame and supports.
Yeah. Think materials like zinc or aluminum needed for those structures. That affects things like human toxicity impacts and, again, particulate matter.
Okay, and finally BIPV, the building integrated ones. What was second for them?
For BIPV, it was the inverter, that electronic box that converts DC to AC power. That averaged nearly 26% of the impact. It particularly affects resource use, specifically minerals and metals, think copper, gold.
Okay.
And also human toxicity, the non-cancer kind, related to producing those components.
So it's really across the board in manufacturing cells, modules, mounting electronics.
Yeah.
If that's the main hotspot, what did this study suggest we actually do about it? What are the mitigation strategies?
The researchers pointed to a few key areas. Number one, keep pushing innovative cell research, making them more efficient, uses less material per kilowatt, and finding less energy-intensive ways to make them.
Makes sense.
Second, enhance inverter durability. If they last longer, you make fewer of them.
Right. Fewer resources, less manufacturing impact over time.
Exactly. Third, optimize the module production processes, especially things like making flat glass more efficiently.
Hmm.
And finally, really implement robust recycling programs for everything. Get those materials back into the loop.
Critical for circularity.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift gears to the comparisons, because this is where things often can get really telling. How do these technologies stack up when you layer in climate, time, and their specific designs? It's never just one answer, is it?
Definitely not. And climate, as we touched on, matters hugely. The studies showed this very clearly. Lappeenranta, up in Finland, consistently the highest environmental impacts per kilowatt for all the PV
Just
types.
because of less sun.
Primarily, yes. That lower annual solar irradiation, remember, 21% to 47% lower than Munich and Murcia, means you generate less electricity from the same size system. So the environmental burden embedded in that system gets spread over fewer kilowatt hours.
So location, location, location. It's not just for real estate.
Absolutely paramount here.
And Murcia, down in sunny Spain, must have shown the reverse effect, a kind of natural advantage.
Exactly right. With its high solar irradiance, Murcia consistently showed significantly lower environmental impacts per unit of energy. That obviously helps the economics too, but it really underscores how crucial site selection and regional tailoring are.
Okay, what about the time dimension? Looking from 2022 out to 2050. Technology improves, right? Did the impacts generally go down?
Yes, definitely an encouraging trend there. Overall environmental impacts generally decrease over time for all the technologies studied. The 2050 projections consistently showed the lowest impacts.
Good news. Any difference between the big utility scale systems and the smaller BIPV?
Yeah, the large-scale stuff, floating and bifacial PV, they tended to achieve more significant impact reductions over time compared to the small-scale BIPV.
Why is that? Just bigger efficiency gains expected.
Partly that. The future tech, like those perovskite silicon tandem cells projected for 2050, they have significantly higher nameplate efficiency, maybe 7–8% higher than earlier tech.
Okay.
That means you need less material, less land, less infrastructure overall to generate the same amount of power. Plus, they projected longer lifespans too, going from maybe 40 years up to 50 years.
Longer life, higher efficiency, that all reduces the impact per kilowatt.
Right.
But you mentioned BIPV didn't improve quite as dramatically. Is there something specific there?
Yeah, BITZ showed a bit of a unique pattern. For some impact categories like freshwater eutrophication, ionizing radiation, resource use, the impacts were actually projected to be higher in 2030 than 2022 in some locations, like Lappeenranta.
Higher. That seems counterintuitive.
It does. It suggests that even with general efficiency improvements in the cells themselves, there might be other factors related to BIPV-specific materials or manufacturing processes for that 2030 tech generation that create challenges in certain impact areas. It highlights it's not always a simple downward trend for every single category and technology type.
Interesting nuance. Okay, the big showdown then. Based on this study, considering all these factors, which technology emerged as maybe the environmental frontrunner, particularly for utility scale?
Among the large utility scale options, this study found that bifacial PV systems generally had the lowest environmental impact.
Bifacial. Why them specifically?
It comes back to that ability to capture sunlight from both sides. That significantly boosts the actual electricity generated from the same panel footprint.
Right, more bang for your environmental buck, so to speak.
Exactly. You're spreading the manufacturing footprint over more kilowatt hours produced. That makes them incredibly efficient from an environmental impact perspective.
Okay, what about floating PV? They avoid land use conflicts, which seems like a big plus. Did the study see them as competitive? Any downsides?
Floating PV definitely showed lower impacts than conventional ground-mounted monofacial PV, largely because of that land use saving, and also potentially better cooling from the water, which can slightly boost efficiency.
That's good.
But the study did flag some specific challenges. You need better encapsulation to protect against moisture long-term. There are corrosion risks. Temperature swings can be harsh. Ice formation in places like Finland is a real issue.
Mechanical stress too, I imagine. Waves, wind.
Yes, mechanical stress from waves and wind. And crucially, potential impacts on the aquatic ecosystem underneath shading, water temperature changes. Those need careful assessment.
So, promising, but still things to work out and manage carefully. Now, BIPV, the building integrated stuff, we heard it had some impact challenges. Did it generally perform worse than, say, standard rooftop panels?
Generally, yes. The BIPV systems in the study often exhibited the highest environmental impact among the small-scale options compared.
Why was that? Is it the tech itself or how it's used?
It often came down to the installation angle. BIPV is frequently installed vertically on facades, like at a 90-degree angle.
Right. Looks sleek, but maybe not great for catching sun.
Exactly. That's usually much less efficient at capturing solar energy compared to, say, building-attached PV, BAPV. Your typical rooftop panels, which are often tilted at a more optimal angle, like 35 degrees. Less energy captured per panel means a higher environmental burden per kilowatt you actually get.
Ah, so it's not just the panel, but how it's integrated. So what's the recommendation then? Is BIPV a non-starter environmentally?
Not necessarily. The study suggests ways to mitigate those impacts. First,
Yeah.
if possible, consider BAPV rooftop first for efficiency.
Okay.
But if using BIPV, try to optimize the installation angle, aim for maybe 30 to 45 degrees if the design allows.
Right. Integrate it smarter.
Yeah, promote designs where it's part of pergolas, window overhangs, things that naturally have a better tilt. And, of course, continue developing more sustainable materials specifically for BIPV applications.
Makes sense. Lots of potential, but needs careful design. Okay, let's zoom out now. Connect all these technology details to the big picture. The future electricity grid. How did this study see PV integration changing the environmental footprint of national grids in Finland, Germany, and Spain by 2050?
The projections here were really significant. The overarching trend across all three countries was substantial reductions in the environmental impact of grid electricity as renewable energy adoption ramps up dramatically.
Okay, let's take them one by one. Finland's evolution. How did their grid look in the study's projections?
So Finland in 2022 started with a pretty high environmental impact score, only about 41% renewable. Lots of wood, coal, nuclear. Solar PV was tiny, like 0.13%.
Okay, starting point.
By 2030, the average impact drops by nearly half. Renewables jump to over 76%. Wind and nuclear become key players. Solar PV grows to about 5.2% of the grid.
Better, but still a ways to go. And 2050.
2050 shows the lowest impact for Finland. They project almost 95% renewable energy. Nuclear, wind, wood are still significant. Almost 30% of the grid electricity.
Wow, that's a massive transformation. Nearly 95% renewable, solar playing a huge role. What about Germany? They've been vocal about their energy Wende, their energy transition.
Germany's shift in the projections is even more, well, aggressive. They started in 2022 with high impacts, about 44% renewable, but heavy on lignite and hard coal. Solar PV was already bigger, nearly 10%.
Okay.
By 2030, the projected impact drops by 60%. Renewables hit almost 89%. Coal is still there, but shrinking. Wind and solar PV become the main contributors, with solar nearing 20% grid share.
A big jump. And 2050 for Germany.
This is the striking one. By 2050, Germany is projected to hit 100% renewable electricity.
100%.
Yep. Wind and solar PV absolutely dominate, and solar PV is projected to provide a massive 54% of the grid's electricity. Bifacial PV, notably, contributes significantly to the impacts within that solar share, just because it's such a large part of the mix.
Incredible. From nearly half fossil fuels to fully renewable, with solar providing over half the power.
Okay, Spain, often seen as a solar leader already. How does their future look?
Spain also shows a strong trajectory. In 2022, high impacts again, about 49% renewable, but significant reliance on natural gas, coal, and nuclear. Solar PV was around 13%.
Okay.
By 2030, impacts drop by a third. Renewables reach over 80%. Natural gas, coal, nuclear are still contributing, though. Solar PV share jumps dramatically to over 40%.
Huge growth for solar there. And 2050.
Spain also reaches 100% renewable in the 2050 projection, showing the most significant impact reduction overall, down 59% from 2022 levels.
Also fully renewable. What are the main sources then?
Wind power is significant, but bifacial PV becomes the real workhorse, projected to contribute 38% of the total grid impact just by itself, because it makes up nearly 48% of Spain's 2050 electricity generation in this scenario. So both Germany and Spain aiming for fully renewable grids, with solar, particularly bifacial, playing an absolutely central role. The study paints a clear picture of possibility. What does it say we need to do to actually achieve these transformations?
Well, the researchers are clear it won't happen automatically. It requires, substantial investments in renewables, obviously, but also big improvements in energy efficiency.
Use less in the first place.
Exactly. Continued technological innovation is vital. Strong policies that actively support renewables are needed critically, alongside phasing out fossil fuel subsidies.
Get the incentives right.
Right. And finally, fostering public awareness and participation. It really underscores this dual goal, tackling climate change and boosting energy security.
We have certainly taken a deep dive today into this research, the comprehensive prospective environmental assessment of innovative photovoltaic technologies, integration into electricity grids in Finland, Germany, and Spain.
It's a lot to unpack.
It really is. We've seen how manufacturing is consistently that environmental hotspot. We've seen how profoundly climate affects PV performance, and crucially, how efficiency gains and new tech are set to dramatically slash the environmental footprint of solar over time.
The trends are definitely positive.
Yeah, the projections for 2050, they paint this picture of massively reduced environmental impacts, with Finland, Germany, and Spain moving towards grids dominated by renewables, or even entirely renewable. And solar PV is just playing this huge role.
A central role, for sure.
But, while the promise of innovations like bifacial and floating PV is clear, real sustainability advantages, significant impact reductions, this study is also a good reminder that challenges remain, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Things like the long-term stability of those cutting-edge perovskite cells,
Yeah.
figuring out the best way to integrate BIPV, really understanding the full ecosystem effects of floating solar.
These are not trivial issues.
Not at all. And that brings us to our final thought for you, the listener. How do we accelerate these vital technological leaps and the necessary policy shifts while also making sure we address every single environmental nuance, the manufacturing impacts, the ecosystem effects, the material sourcing, ensuring the energy future we build is not just renewable, but truly sustainable and robust for everyone? Something to think about.